Welcome to Hearths of Myths. Tonight, the wind is not howling. Tonight, the air is still. There is a silence that settles over the world when the storm has passed, a heavy, expectant quiet that feels older than the thunder, deeper than the ocean, and more permanent than the shifting tides of fate. It is in this silence that we must find our footing. We are stepping away from the raucous feasting halls where the mead flows endlessly. We are stepping away from the chaotic battlefields where the Valkyries scream. We are walking into the cool gray light of the dawn, into a grove of ancient oaks where the moss grows thick and the shadows are long and straight. We are here to speak of the one-handed god. To many who have only glanced at the surface of the Norse sagas, he is a secondary figure, a warrior who lost a hand and faded into the background while Odin plotted and Thor smashed. But this is a misunderstanding born of time. Before the poets sang of the All-Father, before the cult of the ecstatic wanderer swept across the north, there was a different power in the heavens. There was a god who was not merely a ruler, but the very definition of the sky itself. To understand Tyr, we must peel back the layers of centuries, digging through the soil of the Viking Age, down past the migration period, into the deep, frozen roots of the Proto-Indo-European past. We must understand the tragedy of a king who stepped down from his throne not out of weakness, but out of necessity. We must understand the god of the North Star. Close your eyes. Let the image form in your mind. It is not an image of a man in armor, not yet. It is the image of a single, bright point of light in the night sky. The Polaris, the lodestar. While all the other stars dance and circle, rising and setting, shifting with the seasons, this one star remains fixed. It does not waver. It does not abandon its post. It is the nail on which the universe hangs. To the ancient mind, looking up from the dark forests of Germania, this star was the ultimate expression of divine order. It was the celestial equivalent of a promise kept. And the god who embodied this absolute, unmoving stability was the entity we now call Tyr. His name is a key that unlocks the history of religion itself. In the Old Norse tongue, Tyr is not just a proper noun. It is a word that simply means God. When the Norse texts speak of other deities, they often use his name as a descriptor. They call Odin Sigtyr, the victory god. They call Thor Reidartyr, the chariot god. This is not an accident. It is a linguistic fossil, a remnant of a time when Tyr was the generic and supreme term for divinity. If we trace the etymology back, following the twisted roots of language into the past, we find the Proto-Germanic form Tiwaz. And if we go even further, to the very dawn of the Indo-European peoples, we find the root Dyeus. This is the same root that gave the Greeks Zeus. It is the same root that gave the Romans Jupiter. Dyeus Pter, the sky father. It is the same root that gave the Vedic peoples Dyaus Pita. Tyr is by lineage and by linguistic birthright the original sky father of the Germanic peoples. He is the northern Zeus. He is the northern Jupiter. Imagine the weight of that legacy. Once, he was the sovereign of the heavens, the daylight sky, the shining expanse that covers all things. He was the judge of gods and men, the guarantor of the cosmic order. But the north is a harsh place. The winters are long, the darkness is pervasive, and the needs of the people changed. Over thousands of years, the worship of the Sky Father, distant, impartial, shining, began to wane. The people of the north, living in a world of violence and uncertainty, began to turn toward a different kind of leader. They turned toward the darker, more mysterious, more frenzied figure of Wotan, or Odin, the magician, the necromancer, the one who would cheat to win, the one who traded an eye for wisdom. Slowly, subtly, the Sky Father was displaced. The throne of Asgard was taken by the wanderer in the blue cloak. Tyr, the original king, did not fight this usurpation. In the myths, there is no great war between Tyr and Odin, no Titanomachy where the old generation is cast down. Instead, there is a quiet acceptance. Tyr steps back. He becomes the son rather than the father. He becomes the general rather than the king. He accepts a diminishment of station to ensure the survival of the tribe. This is the defining character trait of Tyr, the thread that we will follow through every story, every loss, and every sacrifice. He is the god of the greater good. He is the god who understands that for the community to survive, the individual, even a divine individual, must sometimes bleed. While Odin represents the self, the pursuit of personal power, personal wisdom, personal glory, Tyr represents the collective. He is the law that binds the tribe together. He is the honor that keeps a promise when it would be easier to break it. Let us transport ourselves to the Iron Age, to the damp, misty borderlands between the Roman Empire and the barbarian North. The Roman historian Tacitus, writing in the 1st century, peered into the gloomy forests of Germania and tried to make sense of the gods he found there. He spoke of a god the Germans worshipped above others in battle, a god he identified as Mars. But this was not the chaotic, bloodthirsty Mars of Rome. This was Mars Thinxus, the Mars of the Thing, the Mars of the Assembly. This title, found carved on stone altars by Germanic mercenaries serving in the Roman legions near Hadrian's Wall, reveals the true nature of Tyr's warfare. He is not the god of the berserker rage. That belongs to Odin. He is not the god of the brute strength and the crushing hammer. That belongs to Thor. Tyr is the god of war as a legal process. To the ancient Germanic mind, war was not always a chaotic free-for-all. It was a trial by combat. It was a duel writ large. When two tribes clashed, it was a legal dispute being settled by the edge of the sword because words had failed. It was a judgment of the gods, and Tyr was the judge. Imagine the scene at a Thing, the sacred governing assembly of the ancient North. It is an open-air gathering, held under the canopy of the sky, Tyr's domain. The free men of the tribe are gathered in a circle, their weapons resting on their knees. To enter the circle is to enter a space of holy neutrality, a space of law. When a decision is made, when a judgment is passed, the men strike their spears against their shields, a rhythmic clattering that signifies assent. This is the sound of Tyr. It is the sound of armed men agreeing to be bound by a common law. It is the intersection of violence and order. Tyr stands exactly on that razor's edge. He knows that without the threat of the sword, the law is just words. But he also knows that the sword without the law is just butchery. This connection to the sword is profound. In the Sigurdrifumal, one of the heroic poems of the Poetic Edda, The Valkyrie Sigurdrifa teaches the human hero Sigurd the secret of the runes. She tells him that if he wishes for victory in battle, he must know the victory runes. He must carve them onto the hilt of his sword, onto the sheath, onto the blade itself. And as he carves, he must invoke the name of Tyr twice. The rune itself, the Tiwas rune, is shaped like an arrow pointing upward, or perhaps a spearhead. It mimics the shape of the North Star's position, guiding the traveler, but it is also the shape of the weapon. Think of the smith in the dark forge, the fire casting long, dancing shadows against the soot-stained walls. He is holding a blade of iron, still warm from the quenching. He takes a chisel. With focused, pious intent, he carves that arrow shape into the steel. Tiwas. He is not just decorating the weapon. He is consecrating it. He is inviting the presence of the God of justice into the steel. He is praying that this sword will not just kill, but that it will kill rightly, that it will strike true, that it will defend the oath. For a sword dedicated to Tyr cannot be used for murder. It can only be used for execution or defense. This sanctity of the weapon leads us to one of the most haunting archaeological realities of Tyr's worship: the bog sacrifices. In places like Illerup Odal and Nydam in Denmark, modern archaeologists have found thousands of weapons sunk into the peat: spears, swords, shields, chainmail, the equipment of entire armies, defeated in battle and then offered to the gods. But these weapons were not just thrown into the water. They were ritually killed. The swords were bent into shapes that made them useless. The spears were snapped. The shields were smashed. Why? Because they belonged to Tyr. When a defending army won a battle, they believed the victory was granted by the war god. The enemy's equipment was therefore his property. To keep it would be theft. So they took the spoils of war to the edge of the sacred lake, the dark water reflecting the gray sky. In a solemn ceremony, perhaps guided by a priest of Tyr, they destroyed the utility of the objects to transfer them to the spirit world. We can imagine the atmosphere of such a ritual: the smell of stagnant water and iron, the silence of the victors, exhausted and bloodied, the heavy splashes as bent swords, once the pride of a warrior, sank into the mud to be forgotten for 2,000 years. This is the severity of Tyr's cult. It demands total payment. It is a transactional relationship where the currency is steel and honor. But as the centuries turned and the migration period gave way to the Viking Age, the figure of Tyr began to change. The absolute Sky Father, the solitary judge, began to be integrated into a family. The myth makers, the skalds, began to weave him into the court of Odin. He became a son. In the Prose Edda, Snorri Sturluson lists him among the Aesir, the primary tribe of gods. But there is a hesitation in the texts, a shadow of his former independence. While Thor is clearly Odin's son by the earth, Jord, and Baldur is Odin's son by Frigg, Tyr's parentage is complicated. In the Prose Edda, Snorri calls him a son of Odin. This fits the patriarchal structure of Snorri's organized pantheon. It places Odin firmly at the top. But in the Poetic Edda, in the poem Hymiskvida, the lay of Hymir, we find a different, darker truth. There, Tyr calls the frost giant Hymir his father. He calls the white-skinned giantess his mother. He has a grandmother with 900 heads. This is a startling contradiction. How can the god of law, the god of the sky, be the son of a chaotic frost giant? This contradiction is not an error. It is a window into the dual nature of Tyr. If he is the sky father, he is ancient as the giants themselves. The giants represent the primal forces of nature, the raw material of the cosmos. By giving Tyr a giant father, the myths acknowledge his antiquity. He predates the polite society of Asgard. He has roots that go down into the bedrock of Jotunheim. He bridges the gap between the wild and the civilized. He is a god who understands the monsters because, in his blood, there is a memory of the time before the separation. This dual heritage makes his role in Asgard even more poignant. He is the brave one. Snorri writes, "He is the bravest and most stout-hearted, and he has a great deal of power over victory in battle." But Snorri also adds a curious detail. He is not called a reconciler of men. Tyr is not a diplomat. He is not Forseti, the god who smooths things over with soft words. Tyr is the decision. He is the verdict. In a feud, someone wins and someone loses. Tyr is the one who declares the winner. That is why he is not a reconciler, because justice often leaves one side unhappy. In the halls of Asgard, as the timeline of mythology moves toward its inevitable tragic conclusion, Tyr stands apart. He does not participate in the petty tricks of Loki. He does not engage in the boisterous eating and drinking contests of Thor. He is often silent. He is the god of the silence of the sword. He watches. He knows that the golden age of the gods is fragile. He knows that order is maintained only through constant vigilance and, eventually, through sacrifice. The atmosphere around Tyr is one of stoicism. He represents the ideal Norse man, the one who does not complain, the one who does not boast of things he cannot do, the one who acts. In a culture that valued fame and reputation above life itself, Tyr was the archetype of the dreng, the honorable warrior. But true honor is not about winning glory in battle. True honor is about doing the thing that no one else is willing to do. And there was one thing, one shadow growing in the heart of Asgard that no one else was willing to face. While Odin sat on his high throne, Hlidskjalf, looking out across the 9 worlds, worrying about the end of days, a biological crisis was brewing in his own courtyard. Loki, the blood brother, the trickster, had fathered children, terrible children. In the iron wood, the witch Angerboda had given birth to a wolf, Fenrir. At first, he was just a pup, a small gray thing with eyes that burned with a cold, intelligent malice. The gods brought him to Asgard. Why? Perhaps to keep an eye on him. Perhaps because they thought they could tame nature if they kept it close enough. But as the wolf grew, so did the fear. The gods of Asgard, for all their power, were not immune to terror. They looked at the wolf and saw their own destruction. They saw the jaws that would one day swallow the sun, and they pulled away. When it was feeding time, the great heroes of Valhalla looked at their feet. Thor, who would wrestle the world serpent, did not step forward. Odin, who would sacrifice his eye for wisdom, did not volunteer. The aura of the wolf was too disturbing. It was the aura of pure, unbridled chaos. It was the antithesis of the god Tyr. Yet, it was Tyr who stepped forward. Imagine the courtyard of Asgard. The paving stones are gold, but the shadow cast by the wolf is black and cold. The beast is growing unnaturally fast. His shoulders are already as high as a horse. His growl vibrates in the rib cages of the immortals. He is hungry, and hunger in a beast like that is a threat to existence. Tyr walks across the courtyard. He carries the meat. He does not flinch. He walks up to the muzzle that is dripping with saliva and void magic. He speaks to the beast. He feeds him. This is the beginning of the relationship that will define the rest of Tyr's existence. It is not a relationship of hatred. It is a relationship of strange, respectful intimacy. The god of law and the beast of chaos. The guardian and the destroyer. Tyr is the only one who respects the wolf enough to treat him with dignity. And the wolf, in his own twisted way, trusts Tyr. He sees that Tyr is not like the others. He sees that Tyr does not smell of fear. He smells of iron and starlight. This bond is crucial. Without this established trust, the tragedy that follows would have no weight. If Tyr were just another enemy to Fenrir, the betrayal would be a tactical maneuver. But because they have this history, because Tyr was the hand that fed him, the betrayal becomes a cosmic violation. It becomes a sin that stains the soul of the world. As we prepare to delve deeper into the narrative, we must hold this image in our minds. Tyr, the ancient sky father, reduced to the role of the wolf's keeper, standing in the shadow of the beast, stroking the coarse fur of the monster that is destined to kill his king. He knows what the wolf is. He knows the prophecies. And yet, he performs the duty, because that is what Tyr is. He is the duty. He is the inevitable burden of doing what is right, even when it is terrifying. The stage is set. The actors are in place. The wolf is growing. The chains are being forged. And the one-handed god is still, at this moment, the two-handed god. But he can feel the weight of destiny pressing down on his wrist. He can feel the phantom pain of a wound that has not yet been inflicted. The ancient forests of Germania have given way to the golden anxiety of Asgard. The North Star is watching, and the test of the ultimate oath is about to begin. The golden age of Asgard was not a time of perpetual peace. It was a time of holding one's breath. If you stripped away the gilding of the palaces, the shine of the eternal apples, and the roaring fires of the feast, you would find a court paralyzing itself with anxiety. The gods were immortal, yes, but they were not eternal. They knew the end was written. They had heard the whispers of the Volva, the seeress who climbed up from the grave to tell the High One that the walls would fall, the sun would blacken, and the flames would consume the world tree. And at the center of this terrifying prophecy was not an army nor a natural disaster, but a child, a wolf, Fenrir. He arrived in Asgard as a curiosity. He was one of the three monstrous children of Loki and the giantess Angerboda. His siblings were cast out immediately, Jormungandr thrown into the deep ocean to encircle the world, Hel banished to the freezing mist of Niflheim to rule the dead. But Fenrir was kept close. Perhaps Odin thought that by keeping the enemy within the walls, he could control the narrative. Perhaps he thought nurture could overcome nature. Or perhaps, in his wisdom, he knew that the wolf had a role to play that could not be avoided, only managed. But management requires a manager. And as the weeks turned into months, and the months into years, the puppy ceased to be a pet and began to become a geological event. Fenrir did not grow like a normal beast. He grew with the exponential terror of a nightmare. One morning, he was the size of a wolfhound. The next, he was the size of a bear. His paws were like anvils. His fur was not soft. It was like wire, coarse and thick, smelling of old blood and the iron scent of the deep earth. When he yawned, the gods could see the rows of teeth that were destined to tear the All-Father apart. A silence fell over the courtyard whenever Fenrir woke from his slumber. The Einherjar, the brave spirits of dead warriors training for Ragnarok, would stop their sparring. The Valkyries would pause in the sky. The presence of the wolf was a heavy, suffocating blanket that dampened the joy of the Aesir. Fear, cold and sharp, took root in the hearts of the gods, and fear breeds avoidance. When it was time to feed the beast, the gods found excuses. Thor was suddenly busy in the east, hunting trolls. Frey was tending to the harvest. Odin was meditating on his high seat. No one wanted to go near the jaws. To approach Fenrir was to walk into the event horizon of a black hole. You could feel the gravitational pull of his malice. He was not just an animal. He was a sentient, speaking, thinking entity who knew exactly how much he terrified them. He fed on their fear as much as he fed on the meat. Only one god did not find an excuse. Tyr. Picture the scene. It is twilight in Asgard. The shadows are lengthening across the Gladsheim. The wolf is chained, loosely for now, in a designated enclosure that feels less like a pen and more like a prison yard. He is pacing. The sound of his claws on the stone is a rhythmic clicking. Click, click, click. He is hungry. He lets out a low growl that vibrates through the soles of the boots of anyone standing nearby. Tyr walks into the enclosure. He is not wearing his armor. He is wearing a simple tunic, his arms bare, revealing the scars of 1,000 training bouts. He carries a heavy bucket of raw meat, oxen quarters, whole legs of boar. He does not throw the meat from a distance like a zookeeper afraid of a tiger. He walks up to the wolf. He enters the strike zone. "Easy, friend," Tyr says. His voice is calm. It is the voice of the North Star, unwavering, devoid of tremor. Fenrir stops pacing. He turns his massive head. His eyes are yellow lamps burning in the gloom. He looks at Tyr. In those eyes, there is intelligence. Fenrir knows the hierarchy. He knows that the others fear him. He despises them for it. But Tyr? Tyr comes close. Tyr lays a hand on the wolf's flank. Tyr scratches him behind the ears, in that one spot where even a monster cannot reach. Why did Tyr do this? Was it foolishness? Was it arrogance? No. It was the profound, sad wisdom of the Sky Father. Tyr understood the nature of the cosmos better than anyone. He knew that darkness is a part of the balance. You cannot have the light of Asgard without the shadow of the wolf. To shun the wolf, to mistreat him, to starve him, would be to accelerate the chaos. Tyr fed Fenrir not because he loved the monster, but because it was the right thing to do. It was the law of hospitality extended to the ultimate enemy. It was the code of the warrior. You respect your opponent. And in return, Fenrir respected Tyr. It was a dark, twisted kind of love. The wolf saw Tyr as the only real thing in a city of illusions. "You are the only one," Fenrir might have rumbled, his voice like grinding stones, "who does not smell of urine and sweat when I look at him. You are the only one who does not tremble." This bond was the most dangerous thing in the 9 worlds. It lulled the wolf into a sense of security. It made him believe that he had a place, that he was accepted, and it burdened Tyr with a guilt that grew heavier with every pound of flesh he fed to the beast. Every time he stroked the wolf's head, he knew he was betraying the creature's trust. He knew the plan. He knew the Norns had spun the thread. He knew that one day he would have to trade this friendship for the safety of the world. Tyr lived in the shadow of his own future treason. As Fenrir grew, the situation became untenable. He became the size of a house. When he barked, tiles fell from the roofs of Valhalla. He began to test his boundaries, snapping at passing gods, knocking over walls with a swipe of his tail. The Aesir held a council. The decision was unanimous. The wolf must be bound. But you cannot simply chain a god-eater. You cannot just ask him to put on handcuffs. It had to be a game. It had to be a challenge. The gods forged a chain. They called it lading, liding. It was a masterpiece of traditional smithing. Huge links of iron, heated in the hottest fires, hammered by the strongest smiths of the Aesir. It was heavy, cold, and brutal. They brought it to Fenrir. They did not come with weapons drawn. They came with smiles. They appealed to his vanity. "Fenrir," they said, "you have grown so strong. Your fame is spreading across the worlds. But how strong are you really? We have made this chain, lading. It is the strongest thing we can make. We bet that you cannot break it." Fenrir looked at the chain. He sniffed it. He looked at the gods. He saw the eagerness in their faces, the desperate hope that they tried to hide behind casual banter. He knew it was a trap. But he also looked at the chain and saw its weakness. He knew his own power. He knew that to refuse the challenge would be to show fear. And Fenrir feared nothing. "It looks strong," the wolf said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But for a beast of my renown, it seems like a trifle. Put it on me." Tyr stepped forward. It was Tyr who had to fasten the lock. He wrapped the heavy iron links around the wolf's legs. He felt the muscles bunching beneath the fur, muscles like tectonic plates. He clicked the lock shut. He stepped back. "Pull," Tyr said softly. Fenrir stood up. He planted his feet. He took a deep breath, expanding his rib cage. He stretched. It wasn't even a struggle. It was a shrug. As soon as the tension hit the links, lading shattered. It didn't just break, it exploded. Shards of iron flew across the courtyard like shrapnel, pinging off the shields of the watching gods. The wolf shook himself, the fragments falling from his fur like dust. He looked at the gods and laughed, a hacking, barking sound that chilled their blood. "Is that all?" Fenrir asked. "I thought the gods of Asgard were craftsmen." The gods smiled weakly. "Amazing," they said. "Truly amazing." But inside they were panicking. Liding was supposed to hold him. If iron was like paper to him, what could they do? They went back to the forge. This time, they did not just use iron. They used steel tempered with magic. They made a chain called dromi. Dromi was twice as strong as lading. The links were so thick that a man could not lift one. It took a team of gods to drag it into the courtyard. The metal was dark, dull, and unforgiving. The sheer mass of it was intimidating. When they presented it to Fenrir, the wolf hesitated. He circled the pile of chain. He looked at the thickness of the metal. He sensed that this was a serious attempt. The risk was higher. If he could not break this, he would be trapped forever. He looked at the gods. Their faces were tense. He looked at Tyr. Tyr's face was stone, unreadable, the face of the judge. "This one is stronger," Fenrir admitted. "Are you afraid?" one of the gods asked. Perhaps Thor, unable to help himself. Fenrir's hackles rose. "I am not afraid, but glory is only won through risk. If I break this, my fame will outlast the stars. Tie me up." Again, Tyr stepped forward. The heavy lifting required to bind the wolf with Dromi was immense. He wrapped the chains tight, binding the legs, looping it around the neck, anchoring it to the ground. The weight was crushing. When Tyr finished, Fenrir looked like a statue made of chains. He could barely move. "Now!" the gods shouted. Fenrir began to push. This time it was not easy. The gods watched with bated breath. They saw the wolf strain. They saw the veins bulge in his neck. They saw his paws digging furrows into the solid stone of the courtyard. Dromi held. For a second, for 2 seconds, it held. The gods began to hope. But then, Fenrir tapped into something else. He tapped into the rage. The primal, chaotic force that was his birthright. He roared, a sound of pure fury. He thrashed his body violently, throwing his immense weight against the constraints. Crack! It sounded like a thunderclap. One link gave way, then another. The structural integrity of Dromi failed. The chain flew apart with terrifying force. A piece of the chain struck a stone pillar and shattered it. Fenrir stood amidst the wreckage of their best efforts, panting, his eyes wild with adrenaline and triumph. "Dromi is broken!" he howled. "What else do you have? Bring me a mountain. Bring me the world. I will break it all." The gods cheered. They had to. They clapped and praised his strength. Incredible! The greatest feat ever seen! But their eyes were dead. They looked at each other with absolute despair. Lighting was gone. Dromi was dust. They had exhausted the limits of physics. They had exhausted the limits of metallurgy. There was no metal on Earth, no alloy in the heavens that could hold Fenrir. He was stronger than the physical world. Tyr stood amidst the celebration, silent. He looked at the broken chains. He realized then that the age of brute force was over. The wolf could not be fought with strength, because the wolf was strength. To fight him with power was to feed him. Odin caught Tyr's eye. The king of the gods looked old in that moment. He saw his death standing in the courtyard, bragging about its power. "We cannot hold him with force," Odin whispered, so only Tyr could hear. "We need something else. We need something that does not make sense." They needed magic. Not the flashy magic of fireballs and lightning, but the deep, paradoxical magic of the old ways. They needed the dwarves. Tyr nodded. He knew what this meant. To bind the wolf with magic would require a different kind of lure. It would require a deception so profound that it would stain his honor forever. The physical chains were a game. The next chain would be a lie. He looked at Fenrir, who was now preening, basking in the false adoration of the terrified gods. Fenrir looked back at Tyr, his tail wagging slightly, a look of shared pride. "Look at me, friend," the wolf seemed to say. "Look how strong I am." Tyr forced a smile. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. "You are strong, Fenrir," he said. "Stronger than iron." "Stronger than anything," Fenrir agreed. Not stronger than a shadow, Tyr thought. Not stronger than a whisper. The decision was made. Frey's messenger, Skirnir, was dispatched. Down, down, down. Away from the sunlight of Asgard. Away from the logic of the surface world. Down into the dark, damp caverns of Svartalfheim. Down to the dark elves, the master craftsmen who could forge things that did not exist. The atmosphere in Asgard shifted from anxiety to a grim, sickly waiting. Fenrir roamed the halls, more arrogant than ever. He knocked over tables. He snarled at Freya. He was the king of the castle, the untamable force. He did not know that his doom was being woven from the sound of a cat's footsteps. Tyr watched him. He spent every day with him. He fed him the finest cuts of meat. He listened to Fenrir's boasts, and every moment was a knife in his gut. He was the Judas of the Aesir, the traitor in plain sight. He was the guardian of the wolf, preparing the lamb for the slaughter. But the lamb was a monster, and the slaughter was a binding, and the price would be his own right hand. The failure of Dromi was the end of Tyr's innocence. He realized that the law, his domain, could not contain pure chaos. The legal binding, the physical binding, had failed. Now they had to step outside the law. They had to cheat. And for a god of justice, that is a fate worse than death. As the messenger descended into the dark, Tyr remained in the light, standing next to the beast, waiting for the ribbon that would end the world of the honest fight forever. The North Star looked down, unblinking, witnessing the slow, agonizing death of honor for the sake of survival. The storm was over. The silence had returned. But this was the silence of a trap waiting to spring. The echoes of the shattered chain Dromi had barely faded from the stone flags of the Asgardian courtyard before the silence returned, a heavier, more suffocating silence than before. The gods stood amidst the twisted wreckage of their best metallurgy, staring at the wolf who sat preening in the center of the destruction. Fenrir was no longer just a beast. He was a physics problem that had no solution. He was a force of nature that had outgrown the laws of the physical world. Iron, steel, titanium, diamond. It didn't matter. If it had mass, if it had structure, Fenrir could find the stress point. He could turn his own body into a lever that cracked the world. Odin, the All-Father, retreated to his high seat, Hlidskjalf. He did not sleep. He sat and watched the threads of fate unspooling in the dark. He saw the end. He saw the wolf swallowing the sun. But Odin is not a god who accepts the end without a fight. He is the god of wisdom, and wisdom often means finding the back door when the front gate is locked. He knew that brute force had failed. The contest of strength was a game the gods could not win, because the wolf was strength itself. To bind the unbindable, they needed to stop thinking like warriors and start thinking like poets. They needed to stop using matter and start using meaning. He called for Skirnir. Skirnir was the messenger of Frey, a being of light and movement, a traveler who could cross the boundaries between worlds without breaking his stride. Odin gave him a task that would have broken the mind of a lesser being. "Go down," Odin commanded, his voice like dry leaves skittering on stone. "Go down to the roots of the world. Go to the Svartalfheim, the home of the Black Elves. Go to the dwarves, and tell them we need a fetter, but not a fetter made of metal. Tell them we need a fetter made of nothing." Skirnir mounted his horse, perhaps Frey's steed, Bloduhofi, capable of running through fire and darkness, and rode out. He left the golden light of Asgard behind. He crossed the Bifrost, the rainbow bridge that hums with the music of the spheres, and descended into the heavy atmosphere of Midgard. But he did not stop there. He rode north, to the caves that lead down into the bowels of the earth. The journey to Svartalfheim is not a journey through space. It is a journey through pressure. As Skirnir descended, the air grew thick and hot. The light of the sun faded, replaced by the dull red glow of subterranean magma. The smell of ozone and pine was replaced by the smell of sulfur, coal dust, and the sweat of 1 billion years of labor. This is the realm of the Dvergar, the dwarves. They are the maggots of the primal giant Ymir's flesh, given consciousness and skill by the gods. They are the master craftsmen of the cosmos. They built the halls of the gods. They forged Thor's hammer. They spun Sif's golden hair. They understand the secrets of the earth better than any god. Skirnir arrived at the forge of a specific clan of dwarves, often unnamed in the primary texts, but known for their mastery of the impossible. Let us call them the Dark Smiths. They did not look up when the messenger arrived. They were busy beating a piece of star metal into a ring. Their hammers moved with a rhythm that was the heartbeat of the mountain. Clang, clang, clang. "Hail, masters of the deep!" Skirnir called out, his voice echoing in the vast cavern. The headsmith stopped. He wiped his soot-stained brow with a leather apron. He looked at the shining messenger with eyes that were used to the dark, eyes that saw flaws in diamonds, eyes that could measure a millimeter from a mile away. "The Aesir do not come down here unless they want something," the dwarf grunted. "And they usually want something that breaks the laws of nature. What is it this time? A spear that never misses? A ship that folds into a pocket? We have done all that." "This is different," Skirnir said. He explained the problem. He told them of Fenrir. He told them of Lading and Dromi. He told them of the wolf that could not be held by any metal forged in the fires of reality. The dwarves listened. They did not laugh. They nodded, as if they had expected this. They knew the properties of materials. They knew that iron has a tensile strength, and that Fenrir's strength exceeded it. It was a simple equation. "You cannot bind him with something that is," the headsmith said, scratching his beard with a pair of tongs. "If a thing exists, it can be broken. That is the rule of existence. To be is to be vulnerable." "Then what is the solution?" Skirnir asked. The dwarf smiled. It was a smile full of crooked teeth and ancient, secret knowledge. "To bind him, we must use things that are not. We must forge a chain out of paradoxes. We must gather the ingredients that have no substance and weave them into a ribbon that has no weakness, because you cannot break something that isn't really there. The order was given. The forge was cleared. The bellows were silenced. This was not a job for fire and anvil. This was a job for the most delicate, most dangerous kind of magic. The dwarves set out to gather the 6 ingredients. And here we must pause and appreciate the profound poetry of Norse mythology. These ingredients are not random. They are a philosophical treatise on the nature of reality. They are a list of things that should exist, but don't. And the myth tells us why they don't exist, because the dwarves use them all up to make this chain. The first ingredient, the sound of a cat's footfall. Have you ever watched a cat stalk its prey? It moves with a fluidity that defies physics. It places its paw on dry leaves, and there is no rustle. It walks across a wooden floor, and there is no creak. It is absolute silence in motion. But sound is a vibration. It is energy. Where does that energy go? The dwarves, with their ears tuned to the hum of the earth, went out into the world. They stalked the stalkers. They waited for the moment a lynx or a house cat placed its foot on the ground, and with a magic deeper than sound, they stole the noise. They captured the vibration before it could become a wave. They wound the silence around a spool. This is why, to this day, cats walk silently. Their sound was taken to bind the wolf. The second ingredient, the beard of a woman. In the world of the Norse, men had beards. It was a sign of virility, of strength, of age. Women, generally, did not. But in the magical thinking of the time, everything had a potential. The beard of a woman represents the things that are contrary to nature, the things that are rare or impossible. The dwarves gathered the soft down, the potential growth, the impossibility of the female beard. They took the wrongness of it, the exception to the rule, and added it to the mix. It represents the binding of social norms, the constraints of gender and role. It is a conceptual ingredient. The third ingredient, the roots of a mountain. Look at a mountain. It sits heavy on the earth. It is the definition of stability. In Norse cosmology, trees have roots. Mountains are just there. They are rocks sitting on rocks. But if they are so stable, surely they must be anchored. The dwarves, who live inside the stone, went down to the very bottom of the bedrock. They searched for the anchors of the peaks. They found the metaphysical tendrils that hold the mountains in place, the gravity, the weight, the stubbornness of the stone, and they severed them. They harvested the roots. This is why mountains are just rocks now. Their magical anchors are in the chain. The fourth ingredient, the sinews of a bear. Bears are the strongest animals in the northern forest. They are the berserkers of the animal kingdom. Their strength lies in their muscles, their tendons, their sinews. But the dwarves did not kill a bear and take its meat. They took the concept of the sinew. They took the endurance. They took the ability of the bear to sleep all winter and wake up strong. They took the resilience. This ingredient gave the chain its elasticity, its ability to stretch and hold without snapping. The fifth ingredient, the breath of a fish. Fish live in the water. They do not breathe air like men or wolves. They filter the water. But in the mythic imagination, every living thing has a breath, a spirit, an ond. The breath of a fish is a paradox, air under water. It is a bubble that should not exist. The dwarves went to the deep fjords. They caught the salmon and the pike, and they extracted the breath, the panic, the life force, the silent gasp of the fish. This ingredient represents the element of water, fluid and yielding, yet suffocating. The sixth ingredient, the spittle of a bird. Birds have dry beaks. They do not drool like wolves or dogs. Their mouths are hard and clean. Bird spittle is a non-thing. It is a dryness that mimics wetness. The dwarves climbed the high cliffs. They raided the nests of eagles and ravens. They gathered the moisture that wasn't there. They gathered the solvent that would bind the other impossible ingredients together. They brought these 6 things back to the forge: the sound, the beard, the root, the sinew, the breath, the spittle. None of them had weight. None of them had form. You could hold them all in your hand and feel nothing. The forging process was silent. There was no ringing of hammers. There was no roaring of bellows. The master smith sat at a small workbench, using tools that looked like sewing needles and tweezers made of glass. He wove the sound of the cat into the roots of the mountain. He braided the bear's sinew with the woman's beard. He lubricated the weave with the bird's spittle and the fish's breath. He was weaving a lie. He was constructing a reality where these things had substance. It was a work of supreme fiction, and, as he worked, the ribbon began to form. It flowed from his fingers like water. It was smooth, soft, and silky to the touch. It shimmered with a faint, impossible light, sometimes looking like a spider web, sometimes like a beam of moonlight, sometimes like a vein of gold in quartz. They called it Gleipnir, the devourer, the entangler. It looked like a ribbon a girl might use to tie her hair. It was light as a feather. You could crumple it into a ball and hide it in your fist. But because it was made of things that did not exist, it could not be destroyed by anything that did exist. To break it, you would have to use a force that was outside the universe. You would have to use a non-force. And Fenrir, for all his might, was a creature of the universe. He was made of meat and bone and anger. He was real, and the real cannot break the unreal. The smith handed the ribbon to Skirnir. "Take it," the dwarf said. His voice sounded tired, for weaving paradoxes drains the soul more than hammering iron. It looks like nothing, but it is stronger than the world. If he breaks this, then reality itself is broken. Skirnir took the ribbon. It felt cold, like a dead snake, yet soft as velvet. He thanked the dwarves, though gods rarely thank their servants properly, and began the ascent. He rode up through the layers of the earth. He rode past the magma, past the coal, past the roots of the trees, up into the fresh air of Midgard, and across the bridge to Asgard. When he arrived, the gods were waiting. Odin descended from his throne. He took the ribbon, Gleipnir, in his hands. He tested it. He pulled it. It did not stretch. It did not snap. It simply was. It felt infinite. Odin smiled, a cold, strategic smile. "It is done," he said. "Now we must set the stage." But Tyr stood apart. He looked at the ribbon. He saw it for what it was, a trick, a deceit. Lading and Dromi were honest chains. They were challenges of strength. Gleipnir was a lie wrapped in silk. It was a weapon of dishonor. Tyr knew that to use this weapon, they would have to lie to the wolf. They would have to exploit the trust that he, Tyr, had built over years of feeding and care. He looked at his right hand, the hand that held the sword, the hand that swore the oaths. He flexed his fingers. He knew, with a sinking feeling in his gut, that this hand's days were numbered. The atmosphere in Asgard changed again. The anxiety was replaced by a grim determination. The trap was ready. Now they just needed the bait. And the bait was not meat. The bait was pride. "We will go to the island," Odin announced. "To Lyngvi, in the lake Amsvartnir, the lake of black grief." The location was chosen carefully. It was remote. It was dark. It was a place where screams would not be heard. They called to Fenrir. They put on their masks of friendship and celebration. "Fenrir," they called, "we have found something interesting, a new game, a final test." Fenrir woke from his nap. He looked at the gods. He saw Skirnir holding a small, silky ribbon. He sniffed the air. He smelled the sulfur of the dwarves on the ribbon, faint but distinct. He smelled the deception, but he also smelled the challenge. "A ribbon?" Fenrir huffed, his breath steaming in the cool air. "You want to bind me with a piece of string?" "It is stronger than it looks," Skirnir said, keeping his voice light. "But surely, for a beast who broke iron, a piece of silk is nothing. Unless you are afraid?" The word hung in the air. Afraid. Fenrir's eyes narrowed. He looked at the ribbon. He looked at Tyr. Tyr did not look away, but his eyes were filled with a profound sorrow. Fenrir saw it. He sensed the danger. This was not like the other times. The other times the chains were heavy. They declared their intent. This ribbon was light. It hid its nature. "I will go," Fenrir said slowly. "I will go to the island. But I promise you this, Aesir. If this is a trick, if this is magic, the skies will weep for what I do to you." The procession began. The gods, the wolf, and the ribbon. They left the golden halls. They walked out of the gates, down the path, towards the dark water. Tyr walked beside the wolf, his hand resting on the beast's coarse shoulder for the last time. He could feel the heart of the monster beating, a slow, powerful rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. It was the heartbeat of a friend who was about to be betrayed. As they reached the shores of the lake Amsvartnir, the water was still and black as obsidian. There was no wind. The birds had stopped singing. The world seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for the crime that would save it. The boat was prepared. They rowed out to the island of Lyngvi, a patch of rocky ground covered in heather and old bones. Tyr stepped onto the island. He felt the damp earth through his boots. He looked at the ribbon in Odin's hand. He looked at the wolf. The forge of paradox had done its work. The impossible ingredients were woven. Now, the only ingredient left to add was honor. And Tyr was the only one who had any left to give. The boat glides silently across the surface of the lake. The water of Amsvartnir is not like the water of the ocean or the fjords. It is heavy, thick, and oily. It does not reflect the sky above. It seems to swallow the light, pulling it down into a fathomless depth. The name of the lake translates to pitch black, or the grief of the dark, and on this day the name is a prophecy. The oars dip into the blackness with a muffled splash, the only sound in a world that has been stripped of color. In the boat sits the company of the gods. Odin, the architect of this doom, sits in the stern, his face hidden beneath the brim of his hat, his one eye fixed on the horizon. Thor is there, gripping his hammer, his knuckles white, his usual boisterous energy replaced by a grim, uneasy tension. Frey, the lord of the harvest, looks pale, for he knows that what they are about to do is a violation of the natural order. And Loki sits with a strange half-smile, watching his son, the wolf, with a mixture of pride and cruel anticipation. He knows the game better than anyone. And there is Tyr. He sits near the wolf. Fenrir is too large for the boat, really. His massive paws rest on the gunwales, threatening to tip the vessel with every shift of his weight. But he is calm. He trusts his companions. He trusts Tyr. The wolf looks out at the passing black water, sniffing the air. He smells the stagnant scent of the island approaching. Lyngvi, the place of heather. It is a desolate patch of land, a rock jutting out of the abyss covered in dry, brittle vegetation that rustles in the windless air like whispering ghosts. They beach the boat on the shingle. The stones crunch under their boots, a harsh, lonely sound. They walk inland to a flat, open space. The stage is set. There are no walls here, no audience but the empty sky and the watching Norns. The gods gather around Fenrir. They produce the ribbon, Gleipnir. It looks ridiculous. After the heavy iron of lighting and the massive steel links of dromi, this little strip of silk seems like a joke. Skirnir holds it up, letting it flutter in the slight breeze. It catches the pale light, shimmering with that impossible, paradoxical glow, the light of things that do not exist. "Well, Fenrir," Odin says, his voice smooth and deep. "You have broken iron. You have shattered steel. Your fame is secure. But we have one last test. A small thing. A trifle, really." He hands the ribbon to the wolf. Fenrir examines it. He nudges it with his wet nose. He paws at it. It is soft. It is smooth. It feels like nothing. And that is exactly why it terrifies him. Fenrir is a creature of instinct, but also of profound intelligence. He knows the physics of the world. He knows that strength fights mass. But this ribbon has no mass. If it is this light, and yet the gods want to test him with it, it must be magic. And magic is the one thing Fenrir cannot simply overpower. Magic is a trick. The wolf backs away, his hackles rising, a low rumble starting in his chest. "I do not like this," he says. His voice is a growl that sounds like boulders grinding together deep underground. "This ribbon, it is too light. If I break it, what glory is there? I snap a piece of thread. Who cares? But if it is made with craft and deceit, if it is magic, then I might not be able to free myself. And if I am trapped, I do not think you will be eager to let me go." The gods laugh, a nervous, forced laughter. "Oh, Fenrir," they cry, "you are the breaker of Dromi. You are the strongest being in the 9 worlds. Surely you are not afraid of a little silk. And even if you cannot break it, we are your friends. We are your family. If it holds you, we will cut it off. We will release you. We only want to see the extent of your power." Fenrir looks at them. He looks at Odin, the deceiver. He looks at Thor, the brute. He looks at Loki, the chaotic. He does not trust them. They smell of fear. They smell of a trap. Then he looks at Tyr. Tyr is standing slightly apart. He is not laughing. He is not mocking. He is looking at the wolf with a gaze of intense, heartbreaking sadness. He knows that the wolf is right. It is a trap. It is deceit. And the promise to release him is a lie. "I do not trust you," Fenrir snarls, baring his teeth. The saliva drips from his jaws, hissing as it hits the heather. "I will not let you put that on me." The plan is failing. The gods exchange panicked glances. If Fenrir refuses, they have no backup plan. They cannot force him. He is too strong. They have to convince him. Fenrir looks around the circle of gods. "But," the wolf continues, his eyes narrowing, "I do not want to be called a coward. I will not have it said that Fenrir feared a ribbon. So I will make you a counter-offer." He pauses. The silence on the island of Lyngvi becomes absolute. "I will let you bind me," Fenrir says, his voice dropping to a whisper that is louder than a shout. "But I need a pledge, a token of good faith, a guarantee that if I cannot break this ribbon, you will release me as you promised." "What pledge?" Odin asks, though he already suspects the answer. "One of you," Fenrir says, "must place his hand in my mouth." The request hangs in the air like a guillotine blade. Put a hand in my mouth. It is a simple, brutal transaction. It is the old law of the hostage. If the gods are telling the truth, the hand is safe. If they are lying, the hand is forfeit. The gods freeze. They look at each other. Thor looks at his hands, the hands that hold Mjolnir, the hands that defend Asgard. He cannot lose them. Frey looks at his hands, the hands that bless the crops. He cannot lose them. Odin looks at his hands, the hands that hold the spear Gungnir. He cannot lose them. They all know the truth. They are lying. They have no intention of releasing the wolf. The moment that ribbon is tied, Fenrir is a prisoner for eternity. Therefore, whoever puts their hand in that mouth is not making a bet. They are making a sacrifice. They are walking into an amputation. The silence stretches. It becomes embarrassing. It becomes shameful. The gods of Asgard, the rulers of the cosmos, are paralyzed by the fear of pain, by the fear of loss. Fenrir watches them, and a sneer curls his lip. He begins to laugh. "I thought so," he mocks. "Cowards, all of you. You want the glory, but you will not pay the price." Tyr steps forward. He does not rush. He moves with the heavy, deliberate gait of a man walking to his own execution. He walks into the center of the circle. He looks at the other gods. He sees their relief, and he sees their shame. He does not judge them. He is the God of the collective good. He knows that someone has to do it, and if no one else will, it must be him. He walks up to Fenrir. He stands before the massive head. The wolf's mouth is open, a cavern of red flesh and white ivory. The teeth are like daggers, like spear points. The breath is hot and rank, smelling of raw meat and doom. "I will do it," Tyr says. Fenrir stops laughing. He looks at Tyr. The skepticism in the wolf's eyes melts away, replaced by a look of confusion, and then a tragic confirmation. "You, Tyr?" the wolf asks softly. "You are the only one I trust. If you put your hand in my mouth, then perhaps I am wrong. Perhaps the Aesir are honorable after all." Tyr does not speak. He cannot speak. If he speaks, he will lie, and Tyr cannot lie. Instead, he acts. He raises his right arm, the right hand, the sword hand, the oath hand, the hand that shakes upon a deal, the hand that dispenses justice, the most valuable limb of the god of law. He extends it. He places it between the jaws of the monster. He feels the wet tongue. He feels the ridges of the palate. He feels the sharp points of the teeth resting gently against his skin, against the wrist, just above the joint. It is an intimate moment. The god and the wolf are connected now, flesh to flesh. Tyr can feel the vibration of Fenrir's growl in his own bones. He looks into the wolf's yellow eyes. He is saying goodbye. He is saying, "I am sorry." "Tie him," Tyr commands. The gods rush forward. They are quick now, desperate to get it over with. They wrap Gleipnir around the wolf's legs. They loop it over his neck. They tie the knots with frantic speed. The ribbon looks like nothing, a wispy spider web against the dark fur of the giant wolf. "It is done," they shout. "Pull, Fenrir. Show us your power." Fenrir plants his feet. He expects the ribbon to snap instantly, like wet paper. He exerts force. He pushes his massive shoulders against the bond. But the ribbon does not snap. Instead, it hardens. As Fenrir pulls, Gleipnir reacts. The harder he struggles, the tighter it becomes. The paradox of the ingredients kicks in. The silence of the cat and the roots of the mountain hold fast. The ribbon bites into his fur, into his flesh. It squeezes him. It binds his legs together. Fenrir growls. He pulls harder. He thrashes. He throws his body against the ground. He rolls. He summons the strength that broke iron and steel. But he is fighting nothingness, and you cannot break nothingness. Panic sets in. The wolf realizes he is trapped. He realizes the magic is real. He turns his eyes to the gods. "It is tough," he roars, his voice muffled by the hand in his mouth. "It is strong, but I have lost the bet. Release me. Untie me now." The gods stand still. They do not move to untie him. They look at the wolf, bound and helpless, and they begin to smile. The relief washes over them like a wave. The terror is over. The monster is caught. Odin lets out a breath he has been holding for years. Thor lowers his hammer. Fenrir waits. 1 second. 2 seconds. He realizes. He looks up at Tyr. Tyr is standing there, his arms still in the wolf's mouth. Tyr is not smiling. Tyr is looking down, his face a mask of pale, stoic agony. Fenrir understands. It was a lie, all of it. The feeding, the friendship, the scratches behind the ears, the pledge. It was all a long, slow road to this moment of betrayal. The wolf's heart breaks before his jaw closes. The anger that floods him is not the hot anger of battle. It is the cold, absolute hatred of the betrayed. He looks Tyr in the eye. "You," the look says, "of all of them, you." And then the jaws snap. Crunch. It is a sickening, wet sound. The sound of radius and ulna shattering. The sound of tendons snapping. The sound of flesh tearing. Tyr does not scream. A lesser god would have screamed. A man would have fainted. Tyr simply exhales sharply through his nose. His body goes rigid. He watches as his right hand, severed at the wrist, falls into the throat of the wolf. He watches the blood, bright, arterial red, spurt from the stump, painting the black muzzle of the beast, splashing onto the gray heather of the island. He pulls his arm back. He clutches the bleeding stump against his chest. He sways, the shock hitting him like a physical blow. The other gods cheer. "He is bound!" they cry. "The wolf is bound!" They laugh. They slap each other on the back. It is a hysterical, manic laughter, born of the release of terror. They have saved the world. They have stopped the prophecy. But they do not look at Tyr. Tyr stands alone in the circle of celebration. He is bleeding out. But the physical pain is nothing compared to the metaphysical wound. He has just sacrificed his identity. He is the god of oaths, and he has sworn a false oath. He is the god of justice, and he has committed a supreme injustice. He has saved the Aesir, but he has damned himself. He has become a liar to save the truth. Fenrir is thrashing, screaming, howling with a mixture of rage and pain. "Liar!" he howls, spitting Tyr's blood onto the ground. "Traitor! I will kill you! I will swallow the sun! I will swallow the moon! I will tear this world apart!" The gods move in to finish the job. They take a great chain called Gelgia, which is attached to the ribbon Gleipnir. They pull it through a massive stone slab called Gjöll, the screamer, which they have buried deep in the earth. They take another stone, the Viti, the batterer, and drive it even deeper, anchoring the wolf to the very bedrock of the island. Fenrir tries to bite them. He snaps his jaws, trying to take more hands, trying to kill anything within reach. One of the gods, some say Heimdall, some say Tyr himself in a final act of grim necessity, draws a sword. He steps forward and thrusts the sword into the wolf's mouth. The hilt rests against the lower gum. The point pierces the upper palate. The wolf is gagged. He cannot close his jaws. He cannot bite. He can only drool. The saliva runs from his mouth, forming a river. The river is called Van, hope or expectation. It flows from the mouth of the bound monster into the black lake. It is a river of hate and waiting. The deed is done. The binding of Fenrir is complete. The gods turn to leave. They walk back to the boat. They are victorious. But as they board the vessel, the mood shifts. They look at Tyr. He is sitting in the boat, wrapping a piece of cloth around his stump. The blood has soaked through his tunic. His face is gray. He looks older. He looks diminished. He is no longer the Sky Father. He is no longer the perfect warrior. He is maimed. He is incomplete. And yet, as the boat pushes off from the island of Lyngvi, leaving the howling, gagged wolf behind in the darkness, there is a sense that Tyr has never been greater. He gave what no one else would give. Odin gave an eye for wisdom, a selfish trade to see more. Tyr gave a hand for safety, a selfless trade, so that others could live. The journey back to Asgard is silent. The silence of the lake. Amsvartnir seems to follow them. Tyr looks at his left hand, his remaining hand. He wonders how he will hold a sword. He wonders how he will swear an oath. He wonders if he is still Tyr. He does not know it yet, but he has just defined the archetype of the northern hero. The victory is not worth having unless it costs you something. The peace is not real unless it is bought with pain. The one-handed god leans back against the wood of the boat. He closes his eyes. He listens to the distant, muffled howls of the wolf fading into the mist. He knows that one day the knot will slip. He knows the sword will fall from the mouth. He knows the wolf will come for him. But that is a story for the end of time. For now, the sun will rise, the walls will stand, and Tyr will learn to fight with his left hand. The binding of the wolf was a victory, but it was a victory that tasted of ash. The gods of Asgard had secured their future, but they had lost their innocence. Tyr, the one-handed, walked the halls of Gladsheim with a new heaviness in his step. The wound on his wrist had healed into a scarred stump, a brutal testament to the price of order. But the phantom pain remained. It was a constant reminder that even the most honorable god must sometimes trade his soul for the safety of the tribe. But life in the 9 worlds does not stop for grief. The seasons turned, the snows melted, and the gods, being gods, required sustenance. They required the ritual of the feast. In the Norse mind, the feast was not merely a dinner, it was the glue of society. It was where oaths were sworn, where bonds were forged, and where the sumbel, the sacred drinking ritual, connected the minds of the participants. To hold a feast, one needed ale, and to brew ale for the entire pantheon of the Aesir, one needed a cauldron, not just a pot, a vessel, a container so vast that it could hold an ocean of fermentation. The gods turned to Aegir, the lord of the sea. Aegir was a giant, ancient and proud, who dwelt in a hall illuminated by the glow of gold rather than fire. He was the master of brewing, but he was also a creature of impossible demands. "I will brew for you," Aegir rumbled, his voice like the surf crashing on jagged rocks. "I will fill the horns of Valhalla until they overflow, but you must bring me a cauldron big enough to boil the wort. If you cannot bring the vessel, I cannot make the drink." The Aesir looked at one another. They had magic ships. They had spears that never missed. They had hammers that crushed mountains. But they did not have a cauldron of industrial scale. They searched the cellars of Asgard. They searched the warehouses of the Vanaheim. Nothing was big enough. The feast was in jeopardy, and with it, the social cohesion of the gods. Silence fell over the council. It was an awkward, thirsty silence. Then Tyr spoke. He sat on a bench nursing his stump, his eyes distant. "I know where such a vessel lies," he said softly. The gods turned to him. Tyr rarely spoke of his past. He was the god of the present, the god of the decision. But now, he was reaching back into a history that most of the Aesir had forgotten, or perhaps chose to ignore. "It lies in the east," Tyr continued, his voice taking on the cadence of a travelogue. "It lies beyond the rivers of Elivagar, where the venom freezes into ice. It lies in the hall of the wise giant Hymir. He owns a cauldron that is a mile deep. Its rim is so wide that you cannot see across it." "Hymir?" Thor asked, his grip tightening on Mjolnir. "The frost giant? How do you know of his kitchenware?" Tyr looked up. His eyes were clear and cold as the North Star. "I know," he said, "because Hymir is my father." The revelation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Tyr, the bravest of the Aesir, the most honorable, the most lawful, was admitting to his chaotic heritage. He was the son of the frost. He was the son of the enemy. This moment in the Hymiskvida is profound. It reminds us that Tyr is a bridge. He is not a pure-blooded, distinct entity of the sky. He is a synthesis. He has the raw power of the giants in his blood, tempered by the discipline of the gods. "I will go," Tyr said. "I will retrieve the cauldron, but I cannot carry it alone. It is too heavy." "I will go with you," Thor volunteered. Of course he did. Thor never turned down a journey to the east. He loved the road, and he loved the prospect of smashing giants. So, the odd couple set out, the one-handed judge and the red-bearded thunderer. They left the golden fields of Asgard. They crossed the Bifrost. They traveled until the manicured landscapes of the gods gave way to the wild, broken geography of Jotunheim. This was a journey back to Tyr's childhood. Imagine the psychological weight of this trip. Tyr was returning to the house where he was born, returning to the father he had left behind to join the Aesir. He was walking back into the shadow of his own origins. The landscape grew harsh. The trees became twisted, stunted things clinging to black rock. The wind screamed through the canyons, carrying the scent of snow and old iron. They reached the shores of the Elivagar, the primal rivers that flowed from the beginning of time. They crossed into the land of Hymir. Hymir's hall stood on a cliff overlooking the frozen sea. It was not a palace of gold. It was a fortress of ice and gray stone, massive, brutal, and imposing. Icicles the size of spears hung from the eaves. The door was a slab of granite. They entered. The interior of the hall was vast and dim. And here Tyr encountered the two halves of his lineage. First, he met his grandmother. The text of the Hymiskvida describes her with visceral horror. She came out of the shadows, a towering figure of nightmare. She did not have one head. She had 900 heads. Think of the image, a shifting, writhing mass of faces, screaming, whispering, weeping, gnashing teeth. She was the embodiment of the chaotic multitude, the raw, unformed potential of the giants. She was the dark earth that swallows the dead. Tyr looked at this monster, his own flesh and blood, and did not flinch. He greeted her. It was a recognition of the horror from which he had risen. And then he met his mother. She came from the other side of the hall, and she was the opposite. She was fair, she was golden, she walked in light. She carried a horn of ale to welcome her son. She represented the other side of the giant nature, the fertile earth, the mountain stream, the beauty of the wild. She was the civilized aspect of the wilderness. "My son," she said, looking at Tyr, and then at the massive Thor. "You have come, but your father, Hymir, is not in a good mood. He is hunting, and when he returns, his anger often breaks the furniture. You must hide." The god of courage did not want to hide, but the god of wisdom knew when to be tactical. Tyr and Thor concealed themselves behind a pillar at the end of the hall. They hid beneath the great cauldrons that were stacked there, ironic considering their quest. Then the earth shook. Hymir returned. He came in from the cold, and he brought the winter with him. His beard was a forest of frozen slush. His eyebrows were ridges of rime ice. He was massive, a true giant of the old breed. He threw his catch onto the floor, whales, polar bears, creatures of the deep. He stared around the hall with eyes that were like chips of flint. Hymir rumbled. Tyr's mother stepped forward. She was the diplomat. "My lord," she said, soothing the storm, "rejoice. Your son has come home. Tyr is here, and he has brought a guest, the one they call the protector of humans, Thor." Hymir's gaze snapped to the pillar where they were hiding. The sheer force of his evil eye, his terrifying glare, struck the stone. Crack! The pillar shattered. The stone exploded. The beam that held the cauldrons snapped. 8 massive iron pots fell from the shelf. Clang, clang, crash. 7 of them shattered into pieces. Only one survived. A cauldron so strong, so hard, that it rang like a bell, but did not break. Tyr and Thor stepped out from the wreckage. Thor was gripping his hammer, ready to fight. But Tyr held up his hand, his left hand. This was a house. There were laws of hospitality. They were guests. They could not just murder the host. Not yet. Hymir looked at Thor. He knew who this was. The enemy of his race. But the law of the guest was sacred even to the giants. "Cook 3 oxen," Hymir commanded, his voice dripping with reluctant courtesy. They sat down to eat, and here the tension rose. Thor, famished from the journey, ate 2 of the oxen by himself. He ate them bones and all. Hymir watched, his eyes narrowing. "If you eat like that," the giant grumbled, "we will have nothing left for tomorrow. You will have to go fishing if you want breakfast." This leads to the famous fishing trip where Thor catches the Midgard serpent, a story we know well. But let us focus on Tyr. While Thor was out on the dark water, battling the snake, Tyr remained in the hall. He remained with his father. Imagine the conversation, the silence, the one-handed god sitting across from the frost giant, Hymir looking at the stump on Tyr's arm. "You lost it," Hymir might have said, a cruel smile playing on his frozen lips. The wolf took it. "I gave it," Tyr would reply. "You serve the usurpers," Hymir would sneer. "You serve Odin, and look what he left you with. A stump! You should have stayed here, in the ice." "I serve the law," Tyr would say, "and the law has no geography." When Thor returned, soaking wet and furious that Hymir had cut the line and let the serpent escape, the atmosphere in the hall was lethal. Hymir was humiliated. He had been outfished. He had been terrified. He wanted to regain his dominance. He wanted to prove that these Aesir were weak, despite their fishing tricks. He picked up a goblet. It was a massive vessel made of crystal or perhaps enchanted glass. "You are strong," Hymir said to Thor, mocking him. "You row hard. You eat much. But can you break this cup? It is the cup of truth. If you can smash it, I will give you the cauldron you seek. If not, you are nothing." Thor stood up. He took the goblet. He was the strongest god. This should be easy. He threw the goblet at a stone pillar. Smash! The pillar crumbled to dust. The goblet remained, unbroken, lying on the floor without a scratch. Thor frowned. He picked it up. He threw it again, this time at a granite wall. Boom! The wall cracked. The goblet bounced off, ringing cheerfully. Hymir laughed. It was a cold, grinding laugh. "Is that the strength of Asgard? You can break stone, but you cannot break my cup. You are weak, little thunderer." Thor was panting. He was confused. His strength had never failed him before. He was about to try again, to use Mjolnir, to escalate the violence. But Tyr was there. Tyr, the son of the house. Tyr, who knew the secrets of the giant's magic. Tyr, who knew that some things are harder than stone. He leaned in close to Thor. He whispered in his ear. "The stone is hard," Tyr whispered. "But the skull of the giant is harder. Hit him on the head." It was a brilliant, brutal piece of advice. It was the insight of a son who knows his father's stubbornness. Hymir's head was the hardest thing in the universe, dense with age, with frost, with stubborn pride. Thor smiled. He understood. He picked up the goblet. He wound up. He did not aim for the wall. He aimed for Hymir's forehead. He threw. The goblet flew through the air. It struck the giant right between the eyes. Shatter. The goblet exploded into a million shards of crystal. Hymir remained sitting, blinking, rubbing a sore spot on his head. His skull was intact, but the cup, the symbol of his unassailable challenge, was dust. "Well," Hymir muttered, rubbing his brow, "that was a good throw. Many treasures have I lost today. My pillar, my cup." He looked defeated. He looked old. "Take the cauldron," he sighed, "if you can lift it." The cauldron stood in the corner. It was indeed massive. Tyr walked over to it. He wanted to prove himself. He wanted to show his father that he was not just a cripple. He grabbed the rim with his one hand. He pulled. The cauldron did not move. Tyr gritted his teeth. He braced his feet. He pulled until his veins stood out like cords. The cauldron rocked slightly, but it was too heavy. It was the weight of the ocean. It was the weight of his heritage. He could not lift it. He stepped back, defeated by the physics of his own legacy. "Thor," Tyr said quietly, "it is yours." Thor stepped up. He gripped the rim. He heaved. He pushed so hard that his feet went through the floor of the hall. He lifted the cauldron over his head, wearing it like a massive, clanking helmet. The handles clattered against his ankles. They ran. They did not stay for farewells. They ran out of the hall, Thor carrying the massive vessel, Tyr guarding his flank. Hymir, recovering from the blow to his head, roared in rage. He called his brothers. He called the frost giants from the caves. They chased the gods, an army of giants, a blizzard of monsters pursuing them across the ice. Thor put the cauldron down. He picked up Mjolnir, and he did what he does best. He smashed them. He cleared the path with lightning and thunder, destroying the pursuit, destroying the remnants of Tyr's past. Tyr watched. He did not fight. He stood by the cauldron, the prize they had won. He watched the destruction of his father's people. It was necessary. It was inevitable. But it was another severance, another cut. They returned to Aegir's hall in triumph. They brought the cauldron. The ale was brewed. The feast was held. The gods drank and laughed, the foam of the beer staining their beards. The social order was restored. But Tyr sat at the end of the bench. He drank from his horn with his left hand. He looked into the depths of the ale, and perhaps he saw the face of his mother, the face of the 900-headed grandmother, the face of the father whose cup he had ordered broken. He had brought the cauldron. He had enabled the joy of the Aesir. But he had left the last pieces of his childhood in the ruins of the East. He was fully Tyr now, the son of Asgard, the god of the sword. And he knew that there were no more homes to return to. There was only the Hall of the Gods and the waiting for the end. We have walked the frozen paths of Jotunheim. We have sailed the black waters of Amsvartnir. We have stood in the shadow of the wolf and the glare of the giant. But now we must leave the realms of mythic geography and enter the realm of human history. For Tyr is not a god who dwells solely in the clouds or the caves. He is the god who dwells in the structure of society itself. He is the god of the thing. To understand the Norse mind, you must understand the thing. In the modern world, we think of law as a dusty profession. Books, courtrooms, judges in wigs or robes, quiet deliberation. But to the ancestors, the law was a religious experience. It was loud. It was open to the sky. And it was enforced not by a police force, but by the collective will of armed men. Imagine a field in Iceland or Norway or the deep forests of Germania. It is early summer. The snows have melted, and the valleys are green. The tribes are gathering. They come from the isolated farmsteads, from the fjords, from the high pastures. They come on horseback, their weapons polished, their finest cloaks pinned at the shoulder. They are coming to the Thingvellir, the assembly fields. This gathering is the earthly manifestation of Tyr's mind. The site is marked out with hazel poles, creating a sacred enclosure known as the Ve. Inside this boundary, violence is forbidden. To draw a weapon in anger inside the Ve is to become a Vargar I Veum, a wolf in holy places. It is to become an outlaw, a person stripped of all rights, a person who can be killed by anyone without penalty. Notice the language. Wolf. To break the peace of the assembly is to become Fenrir. It is to become the enemy of Tyr. At the center of the assembly stands the law speaker. He stands on a rock or a mound. He does not read from a book, for there are no books yet. He recites the law from memory. He chants the precedents, the fines for cattle theft, the compensation for a severed limb, the rules of inheritance. The people listen, and watching over this entire process, invisible but palpable in the sharp, clear air, is Tyr. He is the patron of the thing. He is the Mars Thinxus. This title, Mars Thinxus, is one of the most vital clues we have to Tyr's original power. It was found carved on stone altars near Hadrian's Wall in Britain, left by Frisian mercenaries serving in the Roman army in the 3rd century. The Romans, with their obsession for categorization, saw a Germanic war god and called him Mars. But the Frisians added the epithet Thinxus, of the thing, the god of the assembly. Why is the god of war also the god of law? To the modern pacifist mind, these seem like opposites. War is chaos, law is order. But in the ancient North, they were twins. War was not just random slaughter, it was a legal dispute between nations. And a legal dispute between men often ended in a duel, a holmgang. If 2 men could not agree, if the judges could not decide, the matter was turned over to Tyr. The men would step into a marked area, often a small island or a hide spread on the ground. They would fight. The outcome was not seen as a result of better fencing skills or stronger muscles. It was seen as the judgment of the god. Tyr guided the sword of the righteous man. The victory was the verdict. He helps the man who has the right of it, the old sayings go. This is a terrifying theology. It implies that if you lose, you are not just weak. You were wrong. You were guilty. This brings us to the sword itself. In the saga of the Sigurdrifumal, the Valkyrie teaches the hero Sigurd the magical uses of runes. She tells him, "Victory runes you must know. If you want to have victory, and carve them on the sword's hilt, some on the fuller, some on the rim, and name Tyr twice." Think of the ritual. A warrior sits by the fire. He holds his sword. It is his life, his livelihood, his defense. He takes a knife and scratches the shape of the rune into the metal or the bone of the hilt, an arrow pointing up, the shape of the North Star, Tiwaz. He whispers the name, Tyr, Tyr. He is not just asking for sharp edges, he is asking for agency. He is asking that his violence be sanctioned. He is asking to be an agent of order, not an agent of chaos. A sword dedicated to Tyr is a tool of the law. It is a badge of office. When the men at the thing voted, they did so by the vapnatak, the weapon take. They raised their weapons and clashed them together. The sound of 1,000 spears hitting 1,000 shields was the sound of democracy in the North. It was the voice of the people and the voice of the god speaking in unison. But the law is more than just fighting. It is binding, and the strongest bind is the oath. In a pre-literate society, where contracts cannot be signed on paper, the spoken word is the only bond that holds the world together. If a man's word means nothing, society collapses. The oath was a sacred act, a magical act. To swear an oath was to invite the gods to destroy you if you broke it. Oaths were sworn on a ring, the temple ring, a heavy arm ring of silver or gold, kept on the altar of the temple, stained with the blood of sacrifices. When a man had to testify, he laid his hand on the ring. He called upon Tyr. He called upon the Asmegin, the main strength of the gods. I swear by the ring, by the heavy stone, by the grass that grows, and the son that I father. This connects us directly back to the island of Lyngvi. Why did Tyr lose his hand? Because he swore a false oath to the wolf. He swore they would release him, knowing they would not. He sacrificed his hand, the hand that holds the ring, the hand that holds the sword, to pay for the lie. He took the karmic hit for the entire pantheon. This is why Tyr is the god of the oath, because he knows the cost of breaking one. He is the cautionary tale. He is the one who says, "Look at my stump. This is what happens when you lie. Even if you lie for a good reason, you lose a part of yourself." In the human world, the penalties for breaking an oath were severe. A man who broke his word became a niding, a nothing, a scoundrel, a social pariah. He was cast out. He was often driven into the woods to live like a wolf. The connection is explicit. To have no honor is to have no humanity. It is to be a beast. Tyr stands at the gate between the man and the monster, holding the line with his one remaining hand. But Tyr's influence was not limited to the elite warriors or the judges. It permeated the calendar of the common people. In the Roman world, the third day of the week was Dies Marta, the day of Mars. When the Germanic peoples adopted the 7-day week, they had to translate the gods. They looked at Mars, the god of war, the guardian of the state, and they asked, "Who is our Mars?" They did not choose Odin. They did not choose Thor. They chose Tyr, Tiwaz. And so, Dies Martis became Tiwesdag in Old English, Tistagur in Old Norse, Dienstag in German, Tuesday in modern English. Every time we write a date, every time we schedule an appointment for a Tuesday, we are invoking the name of the one-handed God. He is hidden in the very structure of our time. He is the day of the thing, the day of business, the day of decision. Monday, Moon Day, is for dreaming. Sunday, Sunday, is for worship. But Tuesday is for action. It is the day to pick up the sword, or the pen, or the tool, and do the work of the tribe. This linguistic survival is remarkable when we consider how much Tyr faded in the later myths. By the time Snorri Sturluson was writing in the 13th century, Tyr was a secondary character. Odin had usurped the role of the Sky Father. Thor had usurped the role of the Defender. Frey had usurped the role of prosperity. Tyr was left with only the war and the law. Why did this shift happen? Why did the North Star fade? Perhaps it is because the world changed. The migration period was a time of chaos. Tribes were moving, fighting, displacing one another. The old, static order of the Sky Father, the God who sits and watches, was no longer enough. The people needed a God who moved. They needed a God who was cunning. They needed Odin. Odin, who could teach them how to ambush, how to deceive, how to win against superior odds. Tyr, with his rigid code of honor, was too stiff for a world on fire. Or perhaps it was the rise of the comitatus, the war band. The loyalty shifted from the tribe to the chieftain. Odin is the god of the chieftain, the jarl, the king. He gives victory to his favorites, often unfairly. He is capricious. He creates chaos to cull the weak. Tyr is the opposite. Tyr is the god of the carl, the free man. He does not play favorites. He is the law that applies to everyone, from the king to the peasant. If the king breaks the law, Tyr judges him. This kind of egalitarian justice is dangerous to tyrants. As the power of the kings grew in Scandinavia, the worship of the god of the assembly naturally waned in favor of the god of the throne. But Tyr never vanished completely. He remained in the shadows, the silent conscience of the Aesir. When Odin's schemes became too convoluted, when Thor's rage became too destructive, Tyr was the reminder of the foundational principles. You cannot build a society on magic and hammers alone. You need a contract. You need a thing. Let us look at his hand again. The left hand, the sinister hand in Latin tradition. But in Tyr's case, it is simply the remaining hand. He had to relearn everything. He had to learn to eat, to dress, to fight with his off hand. This is a powerful metaphor for resilience. The Norse world was hard. Men lost eyes, limbs, lives. Tyr was the god who showed them that injury is not the end of usefulness. A halting man can ride a horse, the Havamal says. A handless man can herd a flock. Tyr is the patron of the wounded veteran. He is the god of the man who has given everything for his country and has come home changed. He does not ask for pity. He stands in the assembly, his stump visible, and he demands respect, not for what he can do, but for what he did. The worship of Tyr was solemn. We do not hear of ecstatic dances or frenzied rituals for him. We imagine quiet sacrifices. A boar, perhaps, the symbol of the oath, or the bending of a weapon. The prayers offered to him were likely short and direct. Tyr, guide my blade. Tyr, keep my oath true. Tyr, let the judgment be just. There is a place in Denmark near Lake Tisø, Tyr's lake. It was a great center of worship. Archaeologists have found evidence of a massive hall there and weapon sacrifices. It suggests that even late in the Viking Age, there were pockets of deep devotion to the old judge, people who preferred the stability of the North Star to the wandering eye of Odin. As the twilight of the gods approaches, the role of the law becomes even more critical. When the Fimbul winter comes, the first thing to break is not the buildings, but the bonds of society. Brothers will fight and kill each other, the prophecy says. Sisters' children will defile kinship. This is the death of Tyr's domain, the collapse of the thing, the collapse of the oath. When men no longer keep their word, the wolf breaks loose. The physical binding of Fenrir was a mirror of the social binding of humanity. As long as we keep our laws, the wolf is bound. But when we descend into anarchy, the ribbon snaps. Tyr watches this decline. He sees the wolf age approaching. He sees the swords being drawn not for justice, but for greed. He sees the oaths being sworn with crossed fingers. He knows that his time is ending. The Mars Thinxus is being replaced by the Mars of slaughter. But he does not flee. He does not hide. He sharpens his sword, his left-handed sword. He waits for the sound of the Gjallarhorn. He knows that he has one last duty to perform. He has one last monster to face, not the wolf. Odin has claimed that death. but the wolf's shadow, the hound of hell. The stage is set for the final duel. The thing is closed. The arguments are over. The verdict is in, and the sentence is Ragnarok. The seasons in the north are a cycle of promise and payment. Spring promised life. Winter demands payment in the form of endurance. But there comes a winter that does not end. It is the winter that was whispered about in the oldest prophecies, the winter that made even the All-Father shiver in his high seat. Fimbulvetur, the Fimbul winter, the mighty winter. It begins quietly. The snow falls, as it always does, covering the pine forests and the roofs of the longhouses in a blanket of white. But then, the spring does not come. The sun, Sol, grows pale and distant, like a dying ember in a heap of ash. The wolves, Skoll and Hati, who have chased the celestial bodies since the dawn of time, draw closer. The sky turns a permanent, bruising shade of iron gray. The cold deepens until it is not just a temperature, but a presence, a malevolent spirit that seeks out the warmth in the marrow of every living thing. For 3 years, the snow falls, and in the shadow of this endless blizzard, the bonds of society, the very bonds that Tyr spent his existence forging and protecting, begin to snap. The texts tell us, brothers shall fight and fell each other, and sisters' sons shall kinship stain. This is the true horror of Ragnarok. It is not the fire giants or the monsters. It is the collapse of the law. It is the disintegration of the thing. When hunger gnaws at the belly, oaths are forgotten. When the cold freezes the blood, loyalty shatters. Tyr watches this from the ramparts of Asgard. He is the god of the assembly, and he sees the cosmic assembly dissolving into anarchy. He sees men becoming wolves. He sees the wolf age descending upon Midgard. And he knows, with the stoic certainty of the North Star, that his time is done. The world no longer has a place for a god of justice, because justice requires a civilization to sustain it. Now, there is only survival. He stands on the wall, the wind whipping his cloak. He looks at his left hand, his sword hand now. He has trained for eons for this moment. He has learned the balance of the shield. He has learned to strike with the offhand. He is ready, but he is also tired. There is a profound melancholia in Tyr at the end of days. He is the guardian of a hollow fortress. The ideals he represented are already dead. Now he must simply fight for the memory of them. Then the sound comes. It is not the howl of a wolf. It is the blast of a horn. Heimdall, the watchman, standing on the Bifrost Bridge, lifts the Gjallarhorn to his lips. He blows a note that cracks the sky. It is a sound of absolute urgency, a sound that wakes the dead, a sound that vibrates in the roots of Yggdrasil. Wake up, Aesir, wake up, Einherjar. The time of waiting is over. The gates of Valhalla throw open. The 540 doors, through which 800 warriors can march abreast, disgorge their armies. The golden shields clash. The spears form a forest of steel. Odin rides out in front, wearing his golden helmet, the eagle helm, and carrying Gungnir. Thor rides beside him, his hammer crackling with the last fury of the storm. And Tyr rides with them. He does not ride with the flash and thunder of his kin. He rides with a grim, quiet determination. He knows the prophecy. He knows that none of the old gods are coming back from this field. This is a one-way march to the plains of Vigrid, the field of battle that stretches 100 leagues in every direction. As they arrive at the field, the forces of chaos are waiting. The spectacle is nightmarish. The sky has been torn open. From the south, the fire giants of Muspelheim are advancing, led by Surtur, with his sword that shines brighter than the sun. From the east, the frost giants of Hymir's kin are marching, bringing the cold of the void. From the sea, the ship Naglfar has arrived, made of the fingernails of dead men, steered by the traitor Loki. And there are the beasts. Fenrir is there. The ribbon Gleipnir has finally failed. The lie has unraveled. The wolf has grown to a size that defies comprehension. His lower jaw scrapes the earth. His upper jaw touches the sky. His eyes are burning with a hatred that has had aeons to ferment. He makes for Odin. This is the king's fight. The All-Father against the All-Devourer. Thor finds his nemesis, Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent. They begin their dance of poison and thunder. But Tyr? Tyr does not fight Fenrir. That is not his weird. Tyr turns his gaze to the dark legions of Hel, the goddess of the dead. And stepping out from the mist of Niflheim is a creature that is the dark mirror of Fenrir. Garm. In the Prose Edda, Snorri tells us, "Then shall the dog Garm be loosed, which is bound before Gnipaheller. Garm is the hound of Hel. He is the guardian of the gates of the underworld, while Fenrir is the wolf of the wild, the enemy of the cosmic order. Garm is the hound of the grave, the enemy of life itself. His chest is stained red with the blood of the dead. He is a creature of pure, mindless destruction." Why does Tyr fight Garm and not Fenrir? There is a deep poetic tragedy here. Tyr sacrificed his hand to bind the wolf. He raised the wolf. He loved the wolf. To fight Fenrir would be to fight his own child. Instead, fate assigns him the echo of the wolf. He must fight the shadow. He must fight the grotesque parody of the creature he once fed. The duel between Tyr and Garm is not described in great detail in the texts, which leaves us to reconstruct it from the character of the god. It is not a battle of magic. Tyr is not a sorcerer. It is a battle of technique against brutality. Imagine the scene on the dark plains of Vigrid. The sky is burning as Surtur's fire begins to catch the branches of the world tree. The noise is deafening. The screams of dying gods, the roar of monsters. In the midst of this apocalypse, Tyr stands his ground. He holds his sword in his left hand. He holds his shield. Garm lunges. The hound is massive, a blur of wet fur and snapping teeth. He moves faster than thought. He is the inevitability of death. Tyr meets the charge with his shield. The impact slides him back through the mud made of blood and ash. The hound snaps at Tyr's face, at his throat. Tyr fights with the cold precision of the law. Every cut is measured. Every block is calculated. He is the veteran of 1,000 wars, the master of the sword. He hacks at the beast, opening wounds that weep black ichor. But Garm feels no pain. Garm is the hunger of the grave. He cannot be discouraged, only destroyed. The fight becomes a grinder. Tyr's armor is rent. His shield is splintered. He is bleeding from a dozen wounds. The phantom pain in his missing right hand throbs in time with his heartbeat. He is fighting for the order of a world that is already burning. In the final moment, the mutual destruction that characterizes the Norse end times comes to pass. It is a recurring theme. Thor kills the serpent and dies. Heimdall kills Loki and dies. Odin is swallowed. And Tyr? Garm leaps. Tyr does not step back. He steps forward. He accepts the bite. As the hound's jaws clamp onto Tyr, perhaps crushing his throat, perhaps tearing open his side, Tyr drives his sword deep into the monster's heart. It is the final execution. The judge delivers the sentence, and the executioner pays the price. They fall together. The one-handed god and the blood-stained hound. They lie in the mud of Vigrid, their blood mingling, indistinguishable. The god of the sky and the beast of the pit. In death, they are equal. Tyr dies alone. There is no one to sing his death song, for the singers are dying too. Odin is gone. Thor is taking his final 9 steps. The world is dissolving into fire and water. Surtur flings fire over the earth. The steam rises. The mountains fall. The sun turns black. The stars vanish. The universe returns to the Ginnungagap, the yawning void. But is this the end? The Norse vision of time is not linear. It is cyclical. The fire burns out. The water recedes. And from the gray, steaming sea, a new earth rises. It is green and fair. The eagle flies. The crops grow unsown. And a new generation of gods meets on the Ida Vollr, the shining plains, where Asgard once stood. Vidar and Vali are there. Modi and Magni are there, holding their father Thor's hammer. Baldur and Hodr return from the dead, reconciled. They sit in the grass. They find the golden chess pieces that the Aesir used to play with in the morning of time. They remember. They talk of the wolf. They talk of the serpent. Do they talk of Tyr? Tyr does not return. He is not listed among the survivors. Why? Because Tyr belongs to the old world. He belongs to the world of the oath, the thing, the compromise, the sacrifice. The new world is a world of peace, a world of Gimle. It does not need a god of war. It does not need a god of broken promises. Tyr's work is done. He gave his hand to buy time for the first world, and he gave his life to clear the way for the second. His legacy is not in his presence, but in the foundation of the new order. The new gods can sit in peace only because the old gods fought in the war. The memory of the one-handed god becomes a moral compass for the new age. He teaches them that sometimes the right choice is the one that costs you the most. He teaches them that honor is not about being whole, it is about being true. As we step back from the edge of the burning world, the noise of Ragnarok fades. The screams of Garm fall silent. The roar of the fire dies down. We are left with the silence of the aftermath. It is a peaceful silence. The air is clean. The water is clear. We are back in the grove where we started. The storm has passed. The North Star is gone, replaced by a new light. But if you look closely at the night sky, in the space between the stars, you can still feel the presence of the Watcher. The story of Tyr is the story of us. It is the story of the compromises we make to live together. It is the story of the pain we carry in silence. It is the story of the quiet courage it takes to do the right thing when no one is watching and when no one will thank you. He is the one-handed God, the leavings of the wolf, the Lord of the Thing, and he is the bravest of them all. We have walked a long road tonight. We have traveled from the linguistic roots of the Indo-Europeans to the dark forge of the dwarves. We have sat in the boat on the Black Lake, and we have stood on the field of the end of days. The fire in the hearth is burning low. The shadows in the room are soft. The wind outside has settled. Thank you for listening to the story of Tyr. In a world that is often loud, chaotic, and demanding, I hope you found some strength in the silence of the North. I hope you found a moment of peace in the story of the god who stood still while the world spun around him. If you enjoyed this journey into the depths of Norse mythology, if you felt the atmosphere of the ancient North, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to Hearths of Myths. It helps us keep the fire burning. It helps us tell the stories that the wind has forgotten. There are many more gods in the high seats. There are many more monsters in the deep caves, and we will find them together in the next long night. May your oaths be kept. May your courage hold. And may you always find your way by the light of your own North Star. Sleep well.